I sat alone in my living room, the familiar silence wrapping itself around me like a weight I had grown accustomed to carrying. This house, our home, once overflowed with laughter and warmth, but now every corner seemed hollow, echoing memories that had slowly faded since my husband passed away. The afternoon light filtered softly through the curtains, casting muted shadows across the shelves I was quietly dusting. My fingertips grazed the edges of worn books and photographs, but my thoughts drifted to him, to the man who had filled this space with life. I could still see him in my mind's eye, sitting by the window where the sunlight hit just right. His face wore a gentle smile as his fingers traced the lines of his journals, pages that held the deepest parts of his soul, captured in moments of quiet reflection. His voice, always calm and full of wisdom, echoed softly in my memory. It was as if he was still here, guiding me through life's difficult turns and tender moments. A wave of melancholy washed over me, thick and aching, settling deep in my chest. For months now, I had spent time organizing the countless papers he left behind. Each document, letter, and diary was a piece of a carefully woven tapestry that told the story of our lives together. To an outsider, it might look like clutter or forgotten relics, but to me, these were treasures, symbols of our shared history, love, and struggles. I handled each page with reverence, knowing they held truths and dreams that extended beyond words. That afternoon, the quiet peace was shattered. Mark and Lily came into the house, their presence bursting through my solitude like a storm. Their voices were loud and casual, echoing from room to room as they laughed and moved with a sense of entitlement that made my chest tighten. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, clutching the papers I had carefully sorted moments before. They headed straight for the study where my husband's private diaries lay hidden, the very heart of his legacy. I lingered behind the doorframe, feeling a strange mix of hope and dread. I wanted to warn them, to protect those pages from harm, but something held me back, a quiet part of me afraid of the inevitable. They rifled through papers with careless hands, voices full of amusement yet void of respect. Their excitement was hollow, born not from genuine curiosity, but from the presumption of ownership. Among the clutter, a wooden box caught my eye, half hidden beneath dust-covered documents. Inside lay the leather-bound diaries, faded and fragile, each one a vessel of my husband's inner world. To others, they might just be old books, forgotten and insignificant, but to me, these volumes were a sacred trust, filled with his hopes, fears, and the silent promises he had made in those little moments when time seemed to pause. Mark, ever impatient, flipped open one of the journals and scoffed loudly. "These are just old rags," he declared, voice sharp and dismissive. "We should just throw them out. No use keeping dead weight around." His tone stung, as if the man I had loved so deeply had been reduced to nothing more than useless paper in his eyes. Lily nodded eagerly, her tone edged with frustration. "Dad's gone, Mom. It's time to face reality. We don't need to hold on to ghost stories and clutter. The important thing is what we get, and anything else is just in our way." Her words, laced with blame, felt like daggers aimed squarely at my resolve. I felt my breath catch, an ache twisting in my heart deeper than grief alone. These were my children, my flesh and blood, and yet they treated my husband's memory with such blatant disregard. I thought of all the years I had poured into raising them, sacrificing my voice and ambitions so that they might have space to grow. I had silently borne the burden of family, held it all together while often feeling invisible beneath the weight of their demands and self-absorption. Despite the pain, I kept silent at first, unable to find words that could bridge the distance growing between us. Instead, I watched as they carelessly shoved the diaries into a faded plastic bag, folding pages without thought. The sound of rustling paper mixed with their soft laughter was unbearable. It was a violence not of physical force, but of indifference, a quiet erasure of everything I had held dear. When they tied the bag shut and moved toward the door, my heart burned with a growing fire I did not yet understand. I felt betrayed, not just by their actions, but by the blind greed that cloaked their intentions. And yet, beneath the sting of sorrow, my mind sharpened. There was a vulnerability in their arrogance, a blinding certainty that they underestimated me. Left alone in the study, I gathered the discarded diaries from the floor, careful with each fragile page as though cradling a beating heart. The house felt colder without them, but inside I sensed a quiet awakening. Their disrespect had unveiled their weakness, and that weakness was my chance. Each diary was heavier now, layered with meaning I had not seen before. More than memories, they held secrets, whispers of a hidden legacy, a past my children had dismissed unknowingly. In their haste to claim what they thought was theirs, they had overlooked what truly mattered. That day marked the beginning of something new, something silent but fierce. I would no longer be the passive figure in their story, forgotten and overlooked. Instead, I would rise with the patience and strength only years of quiet endurance could forge. Breathing deeply, I embraced the solitude of the room and the weight of the legacy I held. The betrayal had been sharp and painful, yet it had also ignited a spark within me, a determination born not of anger, but of unwavering resolve. In the stillness, I found an unexpected companion, strength. The kind of strength that does not shout, but steadies. The kind of strength that turns silence into power. And with that strength, I prepared to reclaim not only my husband's legacy, but my own worth, a quiet resurgence that would take them all by surprise. The moment their footsteps faded down the driveway, I stood alone in the study, surrounded by remnants of a past I wasn't ready to let go of. The spoken words echoed in my mind, harsh and dismissive, but beneath them simmered a calm resolve growing stronger with every breath. No, I whispered to myself. No, I will not let them reduce his legacy to refuse. For years, I had worn the cloak of a silent observer, the quiet mother who gave without complaint, who sacrificed her own desires so her children might chase theirs. I had watched Mark and Lily grow, nurtured their dreams, and tucked away my ambitions in the deepest layers of my heart. That unspoken effort, the fabric of daily sacrifices, had become invisible to them, more ghost than guardian in their lives. Yet, as I turned the fragile pages of the diaries once saved from the rubbish, I found more than just memories scattered in inked lines. There, nestled in between confessions and reflections, was a glimmer of something unexpected, a map of sorts, a blueprint threaded carefully through late entries full of cryptic hints and guarded clues. Words that suggested there was more to my husband's life than I had ever fully grasped, secrets laid bare only for those patient enough to discover them. I recalled the late nights, years ago, when he would write quietly by candlelight, a gleam of purpose flickering in his eyes that I had mistaken for mere tiredness. He was a man of quiet resilience, meticulous in ways that extended far beyond the surface of daily routine. The diaries, once symbols of grief and loss, now beckoned with potential. As I sat at the weathered desk, the old oak groaning softly beneath the pressing weight of history, I let the pages unfold again. There, in one of the last entries, my husband hinted at a hidden fortune. The heart of all that I built lies silent beneath the unassuming shell, waiting for those who see beyond the surface. The phrase was opaque, cryptic, boiling with promise and mystery. The discovery was a seed planted deep within my soul. For the first time in years, I felt a twisting spark, not of despair, but of purpose. My husband had fought battles I never fully understood. It seemed the inheritance my children so eagerly eyed was guarded by puzzles and secrets that required patience, wisdom, and a fierce love. I realized then that their reckless impatience was their greatest weakness. They thought themselves entitled, blind to the complexities woven through our family's legacy. They had failed to see the devotion with which I had protected his memory, silently collecting knowledge, waiting. My patience was not weakness, but a reservoir of strength. The quiet decision was made. I would no longer retreat into shadows, but move with deliberate calm. My plan would not be born from anger or haste, but from steady, careful observation and resolve. I would use their arrogance as a trap, their greed as a blindfold, and my own painstaking knowledge as a shield and sword. That evening, the house was unusually still, heavy with the weight of unspoken battles fought inside hearts and minds. I reflected on all the times I had played the silent witness to my children's impatience, their careless demands masked as love or entitlement. How often had I swallowed the bitter pills of neglect, their words wrapping around me like quiet chains. But now I was ready to break free. I revisited the diaries by candlelight, noting every cryptic phrase, troubling hint, and obscure reference. Each detail was a puzzle piece in the mosaic of a hidden fortune, a secret they believed lost. The words sparked in me a vision. This would be my silent revenge, a testimony woven not in loud accusations, but in the patient reclamation of what was rightfully ours. Through those late hours, my mind churned, weighing possibilities, forming strategies. I recalled the sacrifices made when I set aside my own needs for the children's futures, wondering if they ever noticed how much I had given. The irony that now their greed threatened to unravel everything was not lost on me. But I was different now. I had learned that silence, when paired with patience and careful thought, was a powerful weapon. I could observe without revealing, wait without weakening, and strike without warning. As daylight grew faint and a heavy quiet settled outside the window, a profound clarity took hold. I would not only protect my husband's legacy, but also teach my children a life lesson far deeper than money or inheritance. I would show them that respect, patience, and integrity were not empty words, but the pillars that held a family together. I thought about calling David, the old family lawyer who had once been my husband's trusted confidant. He was a cautious man, meticulous and loyal, someone who could help me navigate the maze of estate law and hidden assets. But I also knew I would need to tread carefully. Secrecy was essential. If Mark and Lily sensed the stirrings of my intent, they would move swiftly to block me. So I waited. I observed. Every conversation, every glance, every careless word was stored away for a time when I could use it. Their greed revealed cracks in their armor. Arrogance blinded them to the deeper currents beneath our family's surface. Days passed with steady routine, but beneath it a new rhythm pulsed, one of quiet scheming and patient preparation. At times, a trace of sorrow crept in, weighing on me like the memory of tears shed in silence. But there was no turning back. My resilience was no longer just for their sake, but for my own. Resilience born from the fire of betrayal, forged in the quiet sanctuary of forgotten pages. I remembered how long I had waited, how many sacrifices had passed unnoticed, and I understood that this path, while lonely, was mine to walk. My children had mistaken silence for weakness, but I would soon prove the depth of my strength. And so I sat at my desk, studying each word, each line, breathing life back into the hidden legacy that would become my quiet resurgence. Theirs was a drama fueled by greed and haste. Mine would be one of calm, relentless justice. In silence, I had found my strength. And in that strength, I was ready to reclaim my home, my dignity, and the truth that had been buried too long. The days that followed were cloaked in quiet determination. Each morning I rose early, the house still half asleep around me. The soft amber light of dawn crept through the windows as I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea growing cold beside stacks of papers and the worn diaries. The life my husband had hidden beneath layers of routine and modesty was slowly seeping into view, and with it came a map, a complex pattern of trusts, investments, and assets, carefully woven and purposefully concealed. Understanding the depths of that web became my obsession. I combed through every letter, every ledger, every note left behind. The diaries, once affectionate reflections, revealed hints of accounts set up far beyond our home, assets tied with names I barely recognized. There were cryptic references to lawyers and financial guardians, legal phrases I now had to relearn through late nights of research and slow, painstaking reading. I was surprised by how much my husband had shielded from even me, not out of secrecy, but out of a need to protect us all from the harsh glare of greed and prying eyes. It was as though he had designed a fortress with many layers to keep the family safe from their own worst instincts. The thought of Mark and Lily, so eager to claim what they believed was theirs, made me shiver. They had rushed in without understanding the delicate threads that held everything together, their arrogance blinding them to the complexity of what they sought. Their dismissive attitude had been a gamble, and they had lost sight of the watchful guardian who quietly waited. One evening, after hours absorbed in deciphering the last entry from a particularly worn diary, I felt a flicker of hope. My husband's words mentioned an old friend and lawyer, David, a man who had stood by him during difficult times. He had been trusted with much of the legal maneuvering behind the scenes. I knew he would hold the key to unlocking the maze that lay ahead. The next morning, I summoned the courage to call David. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed his number, the familiar tone stirring decades of memories. When he answered, his voice was steady, seasoned by years of experience, yet warm despite the distance time had placed between us. I arranged a meeting under the guise of discussing routine family affairs, careful to conceal the storm gathering inside me. At David's office, bathed in the quiet scent of old leather and polished wood, I laid out the situation as calmly as I could. I showed him the diaries and shared the discovery of my husband's hidden holdings and complex arrangements. David listened carefully, his brow furrowing not with surprise, but with the careful attention of a man who had long suspected these secrets. He confirmed that much of the estate had been tied up in trusts, protected by legal safeguards designed precisely to avoid the pitfalls sprung by greedy heirs. Together, we began to form a plan, not a hasty reckoning, but a measured approach grounded in patience and vigilance. It became clear that proving my rights would require more than passion. It would demand organization, legal expertise, and the careful collection of evidence that loved ones had long ignored or actively dismissed. Each day I returned home with quietly burning resolve. Beneath the calm surface of family life, a new role was taking shape. I was no longer just a mother or widow. I was a strategist, a protector of a legacy threatened by careless hands. I studied legal precedents and estate laws, often late into the night, comparing documents, cross-checking signatures, and sketching out timelines. There was a quiet satisfaction in the control I was beginning to reclaim, a reclaiming of power once assumed lost. Every phrase in the diaries that once seemed cryptic now unfolded as a piece of the puzzle, revealing paths to assets once unseen. I mapped out transactions, bank accounts hidden behind layers of coded names, and a private painting collection that no one outside the family had ever been told about. A particular entry fascinated me, the mention of a safe deposit box held in a small, nearly forgotten bank far from the city. Its contents had never been revealed, tucked away like a whispered secret held close to my husband's heart. I decided this would be my next step, finding the keys the past had carefully hidden. Throughout all this, I kept a watchful eye on Mark and Lily, observing their impatience as they squabbled over bits and pieces, unaware they were playing into a game they didn't understand. Their every move was a misstep that only reinforced my cautious confidence. They believed the house and its assets would simply fall into their laps. They had no idea how well guarded those treasures truly were. At times, memories of my sacrifices surfaced, years spent invisible, a burden I had quietly borne to lift them up while my own voice was muted. The slow erosion of my presence in their lives had felt like a deep wound, but now, those same years forged a steel beneath my calm exterior. I was ready to turn their neglect into my advantage. Another meeting with David revealed even more complexities: contracts with foreign companies, offshore accounts, and a last will that had never been signed by my children but explicitly granted me rights in the event of disputes. It was not a matter of waiting any longer. It was time to act. Yet I resolved to proceed with care. Hasty action could be a double-edged sword, one that might trigger counterattacks or deepen family fractures beyond repair. So I baked the seeds of justice quietly, cultivating evidence and layering my preparations with precision. I summoned every ounce of patience I possessed and allowed myself moments of vulnerability only when alone. The tears, the quiet sighs, and the pangs of loneliness reminded me what I stood for: the love that had once built this family, the respect that had been lost, and the dignity that I intended to restore. In my solitude, I envisioned the confrontation to come, not one of shouting or cruelty, but a poised revelation, truth laid bare as an unassailable force. I imagined Mark and Lily caught off guard by the depth of my understanding and the weight of the legacy I protected. This plan was a delicate dance, a symphony of subtle maneuvers and silent victories. It required the calmness of a seasoned observer and the fierce heart of a guardian who would not yield. I was writing my own story now, one of life and lessons, of betrayal and justice, of a mother reclaiming what was always hers. Each day, I became more than the woman overlooked and dismissed. I became the architect of my own rescue and the protector of a treasure far greater than money: the truth. In the quiet dawns and the still nights, the pages of those diaries no longer whispered alone. They spoke through me, a voice steady and resolute, ready to reclaim the future and protect the essence of a home built on love and perseverance. And as the pieces fell into place, I knew that my silent resurgence was only just beginning. The day arrived when I knew it was time to move beyond quiet preparation and step into the light of action. My house, once a sanctuary filled with whispered memories, now felt charged, thick with anticipation, like the moment before a storm breaks. I carried the weight of my plan with a calm I did not yet fully understand. I was no longer the invisible mother, overlooked and underestimated. I was ready to show Mark and Lily the strength they had never seen. I decided on a family dinner, one that would seem ordinary on the surface, a reunion of familiar faces sharing meals and stories. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, I wove a carefully crafted tension. Every detail mattered: the setting, the mood, the timing. I prepared their favorite dishes not out of sentimentality, but with a quiet irony, a reminder of shared histories they had all but forgotten. When Mark and Lily arrived, their faces bright with the usual anticipation, I met their eyes steadily. They smiled, unaware of the shift beneath my calm. The evening began with casual chatter, laughter ringing hollow at times, but warmth pretending to fill the gaps where trust had eroded. As we sat around the table, I sensed my moment. The conversation shifted effortlessly toward the inheritance, an invitation I extended with deliberate subtlety. Mark, ever the eager opportunist, leaned in with sharpened interest, and Lily's eyes narrowed, the flicker of greed momentarily betraying her carefully maintained indifference. I spoke softly at first, weaving stories of my conversations with David, the old family lawyer. I recounted meetings where secrets surfaced and where masks began to slip. Without accusation, I revealed the existence of assets Mark and Lily had neglected, hidden accounts and legal safeguards previously unknown to them. Their smiles faltered, curiosity giving way to shock. I reached for a set of documents I had prepared, laying them out with the precision of one unwrapping a gift meant to unsettle. Among them was a ledger tracing funds invested abroad, a treasure hidden in plain sight, a collection of paintings and heirlooms tucked in private galleries and storage units they had never imagined. The diaries they had cast away were not mere paper, but keys to vaults of history and fortune. The room's air thickened as the gravity of what I unveiled sunk in. I observed Mark's jaw tighten and Lily's gaze dart, flashes of panic flickering behind their eyes. Their indifference was replaced by a sudden, sharp hunger, a recognition that their assumptions had been wrong, dangerously so. Then, as if unveiling the final act, I presented a letter from David, detailing my legal rights explicitly granted in my husband's carefully written will. The document made clear that I was the rightful steward of the estate, the guardian appointed to carry our family's legacy forward in the face of challenge. Mark attempted to conceal his shock with arrogance, but I could see it etched beneath his forced composure. Lily's faltering voice betrayed her attempt to mask panic. Their confidence, once so assured, cracked under the weight of this revelation. I remained calm, the room holding its breath as I spoke clearly, my voice steady and strong. You had everything handed to you on a silver platter, yet you dismissed it, blind to what truly mattered. The quietness of my tone made every word resonate with a deeper meaning. This is not just money. This is our Father's life, His love, His trust, and I hold the key to preserving it. The walls echoed with their silence. No retorts came, no angry protests. The truth had struck with an undeniable force, a power I wielded not with malice, but with the quiet authority born of patience and proof. As the evening unfolded, I carefully laid out the legal steps that would follow, the measures I had initiated unseen, each move calculated to protect what was ours. The diaries, once dismissed as worthless fragments, were now central to this unfolding drama. What my children had forsaken, I had preserved. We spoke in measured tones, each phrase another layer in the growing tension. Mark and Lily, now visibly rattled, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could see the helplessness in their eyes, the realization that the mother they had judged weak was far from powerless. Throughout the confrontation, I maintained a stillness that belied the tumult within. I was aware of every glance, every twitch of muscle, every hesitation. My plan did not require loud conflict, but the patience only a mother's heart could muster, a steady dismantling of their presumptuousness. In recounting the details, I reminded them that respect for the past was not earned by entitlement alone, but through understanding its depths. This legacy is more than wealth, I said quietly. It is built on lessons and love, on sacrifice and trust. You cannot simply step in and claim it without acknowledgement. The words hung in the air like a solemn vow. I saw the faces before me, the arrogance replaced by reluctant respect, the entitlement melting into unease. This was the moment when the illusion they had lived under fractured irrevocably. As the night drew to a close, the atmosphere had shifted. What had begun as an ordinary dinner had become a reckoning. I had unveiled the truth not with anger, but with unshakable calm, turning their suspicion inside out and exposing the fragile truths beneath. They left quietly. the weight of what had happened pressing heavily on all of us. In the stillness afterward, I sat alone, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls that held so many stories. I allowed myself a quiet breath, a moment of triumph tempered by the knowledge that the road ahead remained uncertain. But I was no longer fearful. I had turned the silent pain of neglect into the power of revelation. I had transformed sorrow into strength. And as I locked the front door behind them, I knew the house I protected was no longer a place of quiet surrender, but a fortress guarded by a mother awakened. In the days that followed, whispers of change carried through the rooms, subtle shifts in the air, a new balance beginning to tip. The inheritance was no longer a stolen prize waiting to be lost, but a legacy fiercely defended and rightly honored. My children would learn, slowly if they must, that every crown worth wearing is earned in the shadows first, through patience, wisdom, and quiet resolve. And in this silence, I stood taller than ever before, the keeper of truth, the mother who took back what was hers, not with fury, but with calm justice. This was my victory, not loud or brazen, but precise and unyielding. And in that quiet glory, I finally found the peace that had eluded me for too long. The weight of that night settled heavily on my shoulders, but beneath it lay a sense of profound calm, a calm born from finally stepping out of shadows that had long threatened to swallow me whole. The fragile veil of family illusion had been torn away, revealing truths too long ignored. And now I held the pieces to rebuild, stronger and clearer than before. After they left, the house seemed to breathe differently. Where once silence had suffocated, now it felt charged with possibility. Memories echoed softly from the walls, but amid them I heard something new, the steady pulse of emerging strength, the promise of justice quietly taking root. Alone in the dim light, I allowed the lingering sorrow to seep into my bones, acknowledging the years of neglect and pain. Yet those years had not broken me. Instead, they had forged resilience, a quiet steel that no insult or dismissal could wrest away. I traced my fingers over the diaries, the letters, the documents that now represented more than paper. They were the embodiment of a legacy worth preserving. The coming days revealed subtle shifts. Mark and Lily moved through the house with hesitant steps, shadows of uncertainty clouding their usual certainty. Their voices, once sharp and impatient in my presence, softened with reluctant recognition. It was as if they sensed the fortress I had built, not of bricks or locks, but of unwavering resolve and unyielding truth. In quiet moments, I reflected on their transformation. They had long believed themselves privileged, heirs to a fortune easily claimed, but wealth without wisdom is hollow. My children had been blind to the foundations beneath illusion, the sacrifices and silent battles fought in the quiet corners of our lives. Now they were beginning to see that every crown worth wearing is earned in the shadows through patience, wisdom, and quiet resolve. The inheritance, once a blurred prize to be hastily grasped, had become a testament to endurance, a symbol of love and trust fiercely defended. I saw in their eyes the slow dawning of respect, not just for me, but for the man whose memory and legacy I carried forward with steady hands. I did not seek victory in anger or bitterness. Instead, my triumph was in justice precisely measured and calmly enacted. The house I protected would no longer be a place of silent suffering, but a fortress guarded by a mother awakened, strong, patient, and resolute. I began to reorganize the estate's affairs with the diligence they deserved, never rushing, but always moving forward with purpose. Meetings with lawyers and careful reviews of documentation replaced my former invisibility, and with each step, my confidence grew. The whispers of doubt from others were less a burden and more a reminder of how far I had come. Night after night, I returned to the diaries, drawing strength from their pages. They told stories of love's endurance and quiet battles, reminding me that legacies are never just about material wealth. They are about the heart, the sacrifices, the quiet lessons handed down from one generation to the next. Mark and Lily, too, began to change in small but real ways. They hesitated less around me, listening when before they had turned away. Our conversations, once fraught with tension, now bore hints of tentative understanding. It was not reconciliation yet, but a fragile bridge being constructed piece by careful piece. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled warmly through the window, I caught Mark watching me with something like respect. Lily lingered during a conversation, asking questions not about money, but about the past, about their father's hopes, his fears, his dreams. These subtle changes told me my silent resurgence was not in vain. In embracing this new chapter, I discovered my own worth, not as just their mother, but as a woman who had endured betrayal and neglect and transformed it into unwavering strength. My husband's legacy was safe, but more importantly, so was mine. I realized that peace does not come from victories alone, but from the knowledge that you have stood firm when it mattered most. I was no longer defined by their doubts or disregard, but by the power of my quiet justice and the dignity I reclaimed. The house, bathed in golden light, felt like home once again, not just a place to live, but a sanctuary for truth, respect, and love renewed. And in the stillness, I smiled softly to myself, knowing that in silence, I had found a strength far greater than I had ever imagined. Days flowed gently into one another, and the house that had once felt weighed down by grief now began to breathe anew, warmed by a quiet light that felt both unexpected and deeply welcome. I found myself settling more often into my favorite chair by the window, a diary resting on my lap, its pages a bridge between the past and the life I was rebuilding. The sunlight poured through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns like gentle whispers on the hardwood floor. In those moments of stillness, I felt a comforting presence, as if my husband's spirit lingered, gently weaving itself through the rooms, a reminder of love's enduring thread even in the face of loss. This house was no longer merely a shelter, it was a sanctuary. I learned to cherish my solitude not as loneliness, but as a sacred space where healing took root. The weight I had carried for so long, the burden of being overlooked, unheard, and dismissed, began to ease. Each scar left by neglect revealed itself as a testament to survival, each tear long dry transformed into a quiet victory. Through the prism of resilience, I saw myself anew, not as someone diminished by hardship, but as a woman shaped and strengthened by it. Mark and Lily loomed closer now, still tentative, still fragile in their ways. Their once sharp, dismissive words softened into tentative questions. In their eyes, I saw glimpses of a new respect and a dawning realization of the depth beneath my silence. Our conversations, once fraught with tension and misunderstanding, began to hint at a slower, more deliberate rebuilding of trust, fragile, yes, but present. One afternoon, as the warm sunlight dappled the antique wooden floorboards, I caught Mark's gaze resting on me with something deeper than mere recognition, a quiet respect born from watching me endure, persist, and claim what was mine. Lily stayed behind after our family meal. The hesitant questions she asked about their father's hopes and fears carried with them a meaning that echoed beyond mere curiosity. It was as if they were beginning to understand the depth of the legacy they too now shared. In embracing this new chapter, I discovered a profound sense of self-worth. No longer merely defined as their mother or the widow forgotten in the chorus of youthful ambition, I stood as a woman shaped by betrayal and neglect, but transformed by the unwavering strength forged in those fires. My husband's legacy was secure, but even more importantly, I had reclaimed my own. Peace settled over me, not the fleeting calm of victory, but the deep, enduring kind that comes from knowing you stood firmly when everything else shook. I no longer bore the weight of their doubts or disapproval. Instead, I wore the quiet power of justice balanced with dignity. The house, now bathed in the gentle glow of late afternoon light, felt truly like home once again. Not just a place to live, but a refuge of truth, respect, and love thoughtfully renewed. Here, in these familiar walls, history and hope entwined, offering sanctuary for both the past and the promise of what was yet to come. In those quiet moments, I smiled softly to myself, the corners of my mouth lifting, not in triumph, but in peaceful acceptance. In silence, I had found a strength far greater than I had ever imagined, a strength not loud or brash, but steady and deeply rooted in love and resilience. The future stretched before me, unknown yet no longer frightening. Armed with the lessons of the past and the power of patience, I was ready, not just to protect what had been lost, but to build anew. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again, as did I. In the stillness, I had found my voice, my strength, and my home.